Hello everyone. Today I wanted to do a follow-up video to the Phantom Prince series that I have been reading on my channel. The book was originally released in 1981 and has been out of print for a really long time, but this month, January 2020, there has been a re-release of the book, and it includes new chapters by Liz, and there is a special chapter from her daughter Molly. I believe in the book her name is Tina, which was probably done to protect her identity, or maybe Molly is an assumed name, I'm not sure. The chapter on Molly was sent to me by a viewer named Stephanie. So shout out to Stephanie. Thank you so much for sending me the chapter on Molly, and I wanted to share that with all of you today. I have not bought a copy of the latest version of the book. I haven't decided if I'm going to yet, but I figured there would be enough curiosity about what Molly has to say, and I wanted to share with everyone her words on what it was like growing up with Ted Bundy as a father figure. So I'm just going to jump right in with Molly's story. As I set out to create a picture of my life with Ted for you, I have a big problem. I can't remember how it felt to love him. I had loved Ted with my entire heart, but when forced to accept the truth about who he really was, I could no longer sustain that love. I cannot love a person who enjoys torturing, raping, maiming, and killing women. As I gained the knowledge of who Ted was, I lost my faith in human beings as well as my belief in God. By creating my own story, one that makes sense to me, I have regained my faith. By surrounding myself with good people, I have found that I can trust the majority of the human race. As far as Ted is concerned, I can recall the things that we did together, but not the feelings of love that went along with them. That becomes a challenge as I invite you to step into my experience. Yesterday I met with my mom to go through some of the many pictures that we have, hoping they would jog my memory of the feelings. My mom is the opposite of me. She has a hard time forgetting the feelings of love she and Ted shared. Along with the pictures, she also produced a huge box of letters Ted had written her. As I looked at these letters, I saw more than 1,000 hours worth of his thoughts written there, pouring out his love for her, his hopes for her, his insights related to anything he felt might draw her to him. I realized she's not imagining his love. They had it. It was true for them. And it had been for me too. I left upset that I could not stick my experience back into a box with a tidy label on it. Psychopath, sociopath, lies, Ted's alibi. All preferred over the label of love. My mom and I are damn lucky to have lived through the experience of knowing Ted. Neither of us had to mourn the loss of the other. I have spent the bulk of my life grieving the loss of Ted's victims. I have been sickened and depressed by what happened to them at the hands of someone who chose to make me a pet instead of another victim. Those whose lives were brutally taken away have been a constant presence for me. People have suggested that I have survivor's guilt. I reject that. We should all be alive. What I have is profound sadness and anger that some worthless dirtbag can come along and take away a family's bright and shining light, leaving a gaping hole that is never to be filled. And I loved that worthless dirtbag. I thought of him as bright and shining. He was so smart. Looking at those letters yesterday, I saw that he was using words I still haven't learned. I forgot how smart he was. I forgot everything good about him. He had so much going for him, and at the core of it all was this hidden, evil, subhuman being. For the sake of this writing, I will try to remember my feelings, but it all looks so different now. I see why people are obsessed with figuring him out. For years I thought continuously about how this same person I loved could do these cruel and violent things. Finally, I was able to let go. I took on this mantra. He's crazy, and being sane, you will never understand crazy. Live your life. You still have it. It's a gift. My hero. The 3-year-old me had loved Ted instantly. He delighted me by mixing up the works to my favorite story to make me burst out laughing at his ridiculous mistakes. He knew just how to act to win me over. He was handsome. He dressed well. He made a heck of a first impression on my mother and me. Ted quickly became a fixture in our lives. Deeming our shabby downtown apartment unsuitable, he helped us find a duplex in the Green Lake neighborhood of Seattle. That was fine with me. In the downtown place, the lady upstairs who watched me during the day called me a brat for not letting her little boy play with my toys. I can see why she thought that. I piled them all under a blanket and sat on top of it, chasing her son away if he came near. I was afraid he would steal them, and then I would lose the only things that remained of my life in Utah. One night, as she and her family ate their dinner and stared at me sitting mournfully on my blanket mound, she told me that my mom had forgotten to pick me up and would probably never come for me. The move to Seattle had been hard on me. Being the firstborn grandchild in both my mom's and my dad's families, I was very loved and celebrated by grandparents and aunts and uncles alike. We left them all behind, along with a rich family history and a sense of context. In Seattle, it was just my mom and me. Strange places filled only with strangers. Constant raindrops on the windshield of our freezing cold Volkswagen Bug, the annoying whine of the windshield wipers, a nauseating backdrop for my sad and lonely feelings. When Ted came into our lives, suddenly we were golden. We had someone amazing to live life with. Ted knew Seattle, where to go, what to do for fun. He was there to hold my hand and play my new favorite game, Swing Me, with my mom holding my other hand as we walked. He was so quick-witted and funny. He was physically expressive with his body and might break out in a dance or run and leap when playing with me. To make me laugh, he would sing in falsetto to the songs on the radio or mimic the cartoon voices of my favorite characters. His manners were more polished than ours. He knew all the right things to say to any type of person to make a friend. His clothes and possessions, while not numerous, were cooler than ours. He liked our VW Bug, though, so well that he ended up buying one for himself. Ours was that funny light blue color. His was tan with a sunroof that would let my friends and me stick our heads out while he drove. Ted brought so much joy into our lives. We really felt lucky that he was our guy. What was it about my mom that made her different to Ted that night they met at a bar in the University District? Why did he not kill her? She was a naive, shy, sweet young woman of 24. She was then, and is now, extremely lovable, but all Ted's victims were also lovable young women, each with her own list of good qualities. Did Ted have a normal side to him that was simply a lonely guy looking for a girlfriend? My mom had approached him, saying he looked as if he had lost his best friend. She told him about our move from Ogden and how hard she was working to create a good life for me. Maybe, at that moment, these things put her in a different category for him. Is it possible Ted could have been looking for a standing alibi to make himself appear more normal? I don't know. If he was, he sure got more than he bargained for. He eagerly stepped into the role of boyfriend, father figure, protector, and guide for our new life in Seattle. As a young child, I thought Ted had some funny ideas. He preferred that I wear dresses instead of pants. He asked my mom to make the more conservative choice if he was asked to weigh in on her style. He thought I should be more respectful to my mom. Basically, he was old-fashioned in his preference for us. One night, shortly after Ted entered our lives, we were driving to Herfy's to eat hamburgers. I was being sassy to my mother. Ted outlined his plan to cure me of my brattiness. He told her that if I was being mouthy, then they must completely not acknowledge me. All talking to me would stop, and they would speak of me to each other only as the child. As in, if the child apologizes and stops behaving that way, then we will speak to her again. I had already lost almost every person in my life to this move. Now I only had my mom and Ted, and when they didn't speak to me, I was awash in loneliness. After the first application of this lesson, I quickly learned to be a bit more well-behaved. I remember this incident very well, even though it made no impression at all on my mom. The scary thing about it was that this new guy was attempting to take charge of me, and I was afraid, She just might let him. We did all kinds of fun things together. Ted was always surprising me. During a visit to the Seattle Center, Ted delighted me by leaping onto the carousel once it was in motion, unexpectedly appearing at my side. He was always doing things like that. Through my eyes, he was magical. He broke the rules in little ways that I adored. You expect the unexpected. In fact, Ted could run faster and jump higher than anyone I'd ever seen. My mom loved it when he would jump straight up and click his heels together in the air. She is not a very good photographer, though, and we have many pictures of his body doing this maneuver with his head cut off at the top of the frame. He was kind of like an animal in how connected he was to his body. Thought and action did not have the same separation that they seemed to have for other humans. Once when we were at a friend's house, Ted was seated with his back to a window that had a radio balanced on its ledge. His chair must have been on its cord somehow, because when he rocked back it pulled the radio off the ledge and sent it careening toward the ground. Without moving his body, even to turn his head, he stuck his hand out behind him and caught it in the air. Just like that. It was like he had eyes in the back of his head. Another time, my mom and Ted and I were at the Northgate Mall. It was not an enclosed mall at the time, and we were walking along outside. Unexpectedly, Ted took off running. A man across the parking lot had run past a woman, grabbed her purse, and taken off. She didn't scream. There was too much commotion. My mom and I were oblivious, but Ted had seen the whole thing. He ran after the man and apprehended him, holding him until the police came. He received a commendation from the Seattle Police Department. You know why he saw it? Because he was watching. He must have been watching her. Like predator watches prey. Why did he intervene and act the hero this time? Even after all these years, I couldn't tell you. We loved to visit the Woodland Park Zoo. The reptile house was my favorite. Ted would hold me over the crocodile pit railing and make little moves like he was going to toss me in, saying, "I'm going to drop you, I'm going to drop you." I thought it was a fun game and would shriek and cling to him. When I was 5, my cat Loretta was pregnant. For some odd reason, I had wanted to name her Honky Mustard, but lucky for her, I was overruled. She was white, and honky is a derogatory term for a white person, in case you don't speak 1970s lingo. But I have no idea why I thought that was a good name. In any case, I knew that she was going to have kittens, but I had no idea what that actually meant. One morning she started yowling in a strange way I hadn't heard before. She went behind the couch and started pooping out these pink blobs. "Mom, Mom, get up, the cat is sick." My mom and Ted were sleeping in her room. They came out and told me that these were kittens. They were in sacks that Loretta was supposed to clean off of them. One by one, they became a bit more kitten-like, except this one that lay there real still. It was dead. My mom and I were heartbroken. Ted snapped into action, cleaning the tiny kitten and massaging its chest. We thought he had lost his mind. After a couple of minutes of this treatment, the kitten sprang to life. Ted made it live. My hero. Our house was near Green Lake, and we loved to go there and float in our inner tubes. Ted once suggested we should go in after it was dark. That was scary. He would swim down under the water and startle you by grabbing you. One summer day at Green Lake, Ted brought his yellow inflatable raft. He and I took it out into the lake, and I was swimming around it for quite a while after having jumped out. Exhausted, I went to get back in, and as my hand touched the edge of the raft, Ted made 2 small strokes with the oars, sending the raft backwards a couple of feet, all the while watching my eyes with his own dead, hate-filled eyes. This was the first time I ever saw those eyes. The raft slipped through my fingertips. I swam to the edge of it to try again. Same thing. He pulled the raft just out of reach, watching me begin to struggle. Back in those days, children weren't protected from every possible harm like they are now. I was not in a life jacket and was tired from my swim. We repeated this scenario 2 more times. Floundering, I gave up and turned to swim the longer distance to the shore. Fortunately, I had swim lessons in the summer. I made it to the shore, exhausted, panting, and crying. I collapsed onto the blanket where my mom was tanning herself. I told her what happened. I knew he had done it to me on purpose. My mom yelled at Ted when he rowed back to the shore. "Liz, I thought she was a stronger swimmer than that. It was supposed to be a joke." She accepted this as the truth. So did I. I had been wrong in my perception. Why would Ted try to hurt me? He loved me. Over the years, there were other variations on this theme of Ted innocently hurting me. A sudden body check sending me sprawling to the pavement, a football drilled full force into my face. Each time I felt he had done it on purpose, but I chose to believe his explanations of why I was wrong. I had never heard of gaslighting until the past decade of my life. There was a lot of that going on with Ted. You were always wrong if you thought Mr. Perfect could have had any ill intent whatsoever. You ended up feeling bad for questioning the integrity of such a marvelous person. In 1972, we relocated from Green Lake to the University District. We were moving in, and several kids my age were playing outside on the street. I was terribly shy. Ted was not. "Hey, you kids, this is Molly. She's going to live here. What are your names? Want a popsicle?" He worked his magic on them, easy, joking, and engaging conversation, and just like that, I had friends. I was on my way to being established in my new neighborhood. You're it. Our place in the U District was a giant old house that had once been grand. It had been split up into a few different apartments, and the upstairs was shared housing with a common kitchen and bathroom used by university students. Our apartment was in the middle of the house, which had once been the kitchen, dining room, and parlor. Shabby chic, 1970s style. At the back of the apartment was a tiny half bath with a separate shower located around the corner. I was it. I stood up against the wall, hiding my eyes and counting to 30. Rushing out into the living room, I was surprised to find all the lights out. Spooky, I thought excitedly. I was now 7, and Ted had been appointed my babysitter for the night. It was unusual because if my mom was out, it was usually with him. I saw him right away, even in the dark. He was curled up in the fetal position on the floor, a blue afghan that Granny had knitted for us covering him from head to toe. Worst hiding job ever. I started to pull the blanket off him and saw that he was completely undressed. "You're naked," I accused, frowning. "I know, but that's because I can turn invisible, but my clothes can't, and I didn't want you to see me." And with that, he was off running back to the home base you touch so you don't have to be it. I was confused. That made no sense at all, even though it sounded whimsical and cute. But I didn't want to be it, so I stopped thinking and started running to the back of the house to touch home base before him. We were laughing as we arrived at home base. It was right by the shower. I tried to shove him out of the way, and comedically, Ted fell down to the shower mat where he sat cross-legged, covering his penis with his 2 hands. Still cracking up, I wrestled with him, trying to pull his hands away. I succeeded, and I saw that he had an erection. Being an only child, a girl who lived with her mom, I'm not sure if I had ever seen a penis before, let alone an erection. It was kind of reddish-purple, and to my eyes, it looked like when you hit your thumb with a hammer or something, so I said, "Does it hurt?" He stopped laughing and looked up at me. Something was very wrong. The pupils of his eyes had somehow become tiny, almost as small as the point of a pencil. One was looking a slightly different direction from the other. "No, it doesn't hurt." I wasn't really hearing him. I was searching for the person who I knew. That person was receding, farther and farther back, away from the eyes. It's as if the person who I loved was now at the end of a long hallway, and we could barely see each other, and he wasn't there anymore. But I saw something new seeing me, something dangerous with those reptile-like eyes. My mom had been making me go to the Mormon church, I think because I was unruly, but she denies this. We came from Utah, descendants of Mormon pioneers. However, it was the 1970s in the University District, and culturally everything was very bohemian and free. But not at the church. There it was like 1950s in Iowa, a whole other thing. But I made peace with it and took in the lessons they taught me. I was told that if I was in trouble, or wrestling with what to do, the Holy Ghost might talk to me. They said the Holy Ghost was the part of God that quietly speaks to you and helps guide you to make the right choices. At that moment, having seen a physical change manifested the naked man who was no longer my trusted friend Ted, I started to hear something. Maybe hear is the wrong word. It was like an invisible typist was typing inside of my head, and the words came out as knowing. Somewhere deep inside my brain, this quiet presence was feeding me instructions on how to remain safe. Laugh and smile. Act as if nothing is wrong. Tell him you love him. Tell him this game has been really fun, but that you are tired and you would like to go to bed now. I see now how transparent I must have been. A child tap dancing pitifully to get away from circumstances that were rapidly changing her world for the worse. But somehow it worked, and he agreed. We moved toward the bedroom. Suddenly he said, "Hey, I know. Would you like me to get in bed with you and read you some Uncle Wiggily stories? These are the books of Ted's childhood, and he has been reading them to me. Uncle Wiggily is a rabbit who wears a suit of clothes, complete with a top hat." "No thanks," I said. "I'm tired." My escape plan is crumbling. My memory of what happened next is fragmented. Ted challenges me. I'm not going to be able to get away. I get into bed, which happens to be a top bunk, which is prone to collapsing. Ted was very agile and easily hops up there and lies behind me to read the book to me. "You peed," I blurted out, dismayed and surprise overriding fear. The sheet was all wet. I don't remember what he said to explain this. I do know I tried to keep on acting like nothing was wrong. Loving, in fact, as the voice had instructed me to act. My next memory is of him leaving my room. I lay awake in fear for a very long time, watching the door, hoping he would not come back. He did not. I never said one word to my mother about this until many years later. We loved Ted. He had been such a positive figure in our lives, such a help to her. I did not want him to get in trouble. I knew it wasn't right that he had been naked. I did not, at this point, understand the concept of sexual arousal. It was long after this that I figured out that penises were not always erections. Still, I did not want him to have to go away. I kept Ted's weird behavior to myself. He stayed away for more days than was typical, and I thought that maybe he would never come back. Finally he did, and there was some awkwardness between us at first that soon turned into more or less the usual dynamic that we had, except that I no longer trusted Ted to act correctly toward me. I began to guard myself more physically, trying to control his hands, which were on me too much for my comfort. Ted had always been very physical with me, carrying me, swinging me, unmercifully tickling me, but now it was a much different experience. In the picture books printed in this book from Christmas 1974, I am smiling, but I remember feeling very uncomfortable and confused about how to behave. We are on a visit to my grandparents' house in Ogden. The night before this, Ted had grabbed a camera and run into the bathroom where I was naked in the tub. He took a picture of me, cringing and embarrassed. He told my grandmother, who was an avid photographer, she will appreciate having this picture later. In the past, there had been these incidents that had troubled me. One was how he would carry me. He would put me in kind of a crotch hold. I remembered that a couple of times his fingers had slipped inside my underwear and touched me. This isn't right, my mind told me, but I was confused. Maybe it wasn't an accident, or maybe grown-ups just didn't care about what areas they touch you on. Maybe I was supposed to just accept it as normal, even if it made me feel gross. One night at dinner, Ted scooped me onto his lap and did the crotch hold in front of my mom. "Ted," she roared, "do not hold her like that." "Oh, I didn't mean anything by it, Liz. Geez, you are completely overreacting." And then it was over, and he didn't do that anymore. There were always rational explanations, all of them involving the fact that we were misinterpreting or overreacting. By this time, I had been conditioned not to trust my own feelings. I pushed these incidents far beneath the sea of good times and memories that vastly outnumbered them. I loved Ted, and I wanted everything to be all right again. The truth sinks in. It had been all over the local news that 2 women had been abducted from Lake Sammamish State Park near Seattle. Although my mother was tortured by her suspicions about Ted, she had not discussed them with me. I had teased Ted when the profile picture of the suspect came out. "Your name is Ted, his name is Ted. You drive a Volkswagen Bug, and so does the suspect. You know it's you." He laughed it off. "Yes, that's right, monkey, it's me. Ha ha, real funny." It wasn't funny now that Ted had been arrested. The situation had changed shape rapidly in ways that confused me. Ted was charged with erratic driving and possession of burglary tools, then attempted abduction, and finally he became the chief suspect in multiple murders and disappearances. Shockingly, my mother had finally told me that she believed he might be guilty of these things. I continued to love Ted and believe in his innocence with a child's unwavering steadfastness. I believed that in the end he would be exonerated of all wrongdoing. I awoke every day, suffocating in grief, as it sunk in that this was not a bad dream. This was happening, worsening. Day after day, the television talked about it, the papers talked about it, my friends' parents talked about it. One day, I gathered all the girls in my 5th grade class who I considered to be my friends. Some of them thought Ted was my father because over the years they had seen him do all those things a dad would do. I told them that I knew they might have heard these accusations against Ted, but I knew he was innocent and would be cleared. If they had any questions, they should come and ask me. I believed with my whole heart that Ted was innocent. I wanted to tell everyone in the entire world that they were wrong, wrong, wrong. Even after he was convicted of attempted kidnapping, I thought it must be a case of mistaken identity. I could not believe the man who made my cocoa and taught me how to ride a bike could do anything like this. Ted had given my mom a copy of Papillon, a story of a wrongly accused man who escaped many times from multiple prisons. I was reading well above my grade level, and I devoured this book. It spoke to my belief in Ted's innocence. While awaiting trial for the murder of a woman in Colorado, Ted made his own daring escape, leaping from the second-story Colorado courthouse window. If people were talking about him before, suddenly it reached epic proportions. He was now a folk hero with a media frenzy of clever jokes and banter, even novelty t-shirts. I still wanted to scream it in front of the rooftops how it was all a mistake. He was recaptured within a week, but 7 months later Ted escaped a second time. This time I felt afraid. I had now realized that he knew my mother had gone to the police with her suspicions about him. For the first time I allowed myself to wonder, what if he did these things? What if he comes here and tries to kill us? Instead, he fled to Florida, where we would later learn he raped and murdered 2 sorority sisters at the Chi Omega house. He attacked 3 other women who did not die. He raped and killed and mutilated a girl of 12, like me, Kimberly Leach. When Ted was captured in Florida, the truth permeated my stubborn heart that this was who he was, a murderer. I knew he called my mother the night he was recaptured, and as she said, he confessed without confessing. But it took a very long time for it to fully sink in that this man I loved was a deranged monster who took great pleasure in hurting and killing women. It was during the trial for the Chi Omega murders that I forced myself to assimilate the undeniable evidence presented. My mother remained in Seattle while I was with my grandparents for the summer, as usual, only nothing was normal. Every day the first nationally televised murder trial played out before my eyes. I don't think my grandparents understood what I was watching as I sat there day after day. As pictures of bloody gore that had been beautiful, vibrant young women, people's children, were displayed, as deep bite marks that fit the crooked, nightmarish teeth of Mr. Theodore R. Bundy were analyzed. I learned all kinds of things during this trial, about types of sperm, forcible rape with objects, smashing of heads, and garroting of necks. Later, during the penalty phase of the Kimberly Leach trial, I learned that Ted now loved Carol Boone, as he proposed to her after putting her on the witness stand while acting as his own attorney. Remorseless didn't begin to cover the circus-like way Ted used the televised proceedings to stroke his own ego as this trial for the rape, murder, and mutilation of a child. The killing of the girl who was my own age haunted me for many years. It is only recently that I have been able to stop the brutal details of her death from regularly playing out like a horror film before my eyes. I have grieved for her and her loved ones continuously. In fact, for the majority of my life, I have grieved over all the women who Ted murdered and attacked. The last letter. In the late 1980s, my mom went through an accelerated period of spiritual growth. She took classes, read books, prayed, and meditated. Ted was going to be executed. I think, in part, she was preparing herself for this. I was living at home and had begun earning my associate's degree at North Seattle Community College. For the first time since Ted was arrested, I was doing well. I was on the dean's list. At this late date, I had finally learned what it meant to apply yourself to the process of learning. I went around meeting with my professors, explaining what happened in my life, that I might have difficulty focusing or I might cry in class, but that I would be doing my best to keep up with my good work. I'd be damned if I would let Ted screw me up again. Over the past years, the guy had continually resurfaced, running his mouth, manipulative lies, all of it. Nothing he ever said was the truth. I was filled with a deep, cold hatred as I watched him. Evil asshole. I was looking forward to death silencing him for good. One day when I arrived home from school, a letter had come in the mail. It had the prison address on it. My mom was still at work. Although it was addressed to my mother, I opened it. Somehow, over thousands of miles, Ted had been able to seize on just the right things to say to hook my mom into his toxic drama again. He talked about how he had found God and was working on his spiritual program. I can't remember what else he professed. The reason I can't remember? I burned that letter in the fireplace right then and there and never said one word about its arrival. It was all the things my mom would have wanted to hear. I was unwilling to watch her be ripped to shreds again by his love. Fuck that. Leave us alone. Leave the whole country alone. Nobody save your mother cares that you found God as you try to bargain with the remains of the women you tortured and killed to save your sorry life. Time to die. I remember nothing of the day of the execution. The next thing I remember is that Ted's civil rights attorney from death row contacted my mother. Apparently one of his last wishes was for us to be told that he had really loved us, because, as she put it, he knew you would wonder, given the circumstances. Also, Liz, he wondered why you did not respond to his last letter. I had to confess to my mother that I had burned it. She understood the reasons I gave as to why I did it. She accepted my reasons in a quiet fashion. It was her mournful manner that made me see that if you turned the situation another way, I had robbed her of some closure. As for robbing Ted of his precious Liz, not sorry. Not one bit sorry. I honestly would have taken him out back and shot him myself rather than let him hurt one more person. Courage. For many years I tried to drown my grief in alcohol, drugs, smoking, and reckless behavior of all kinds. As anyone who is a recovering addict can tell you, that didn't work. It only gave me more things to be remorseful over. I finally was able to become sober when I decided to turn around and face what I was running from. As of this writing, I have 13 years of sobriety. Another action I took to move forward was to attempt to join a local support group for the families and friends of victims of violent crimes. I say attempt because when I told them what my link to violent crime was, they let me know that it would be potentially upsetting to the other members of the group for me to join, since they were connected to Ted's crimes through his victims. After the understanding sunk in, I asked if they would please ask around and see whether any of these group members would be willing to exchange a letter with me. They found someone. A mother of one of the victims was willing to receive my letter. I told her about my anguish over the loss of her daughter and how much I thought about these young women every day of my life. She wrote me the most healing reply ever. I was shocked when I read her words that over the years she had wondered how my mother and I were doing. I'd feared that she hated us. Far from it, she had hoped that we were able to heal. She said that undeniably it was beyond shattering for her to go through the experience of losing her daughter to murder, but that as the years passed, she was choosing to bravely move forward and be happy once more. Her refusal to let Ted Bundy take the rest of life from her inspired me. What a remarkable, strong person. I wanted to be like her and to do the same. I decided to begin by reclaiming Lake Sammamish State Park as a place of peace and freedom for me and my dogs to walk. I was so frightened even by the name of it. I went to great lengths never to go anywhere near the place. It was terrifying to visit there for the first time. With my heart in my throat, I practically ran down one of the trails, stiffly dragging my dogs along. Fearing what was behind each bend in the path, I felt my heart hammer in my chest. I have spent countless hours there now, most often in the rain. without a human companion, but with my beloved dogs. I have walked everywhere a person can go in those 512 acres, no matter how remote. There is no path that I have not walked down, and I have seen some amazing things. A large stag with a full rack, kneeling to rest in the tall grass. A coyote who seemed to be dancing and leaping beneath a tree, who upon catching sight of me and my dogs, did an up-close run-by viewing, all the while looking as if he was grinning at us. A juvenile eagle who, with a fierce cry, flew at eye level between me and a strange man who was making me nervous, making the man jump back and hurry away. Maybe the eagle was saying thanks for my solitary version of a Native American fancy dance done to pay tribute the first time I saw him in the sky over the field. And, best of all, 2 adult eagles who, after singing all day in the rainy woods, grabbed each other's feet and did a barrel roll out of the sky right towards my head, parting at the last second and flying away. And now I am moving forward by allowing myself a voice. For years I have quietly listened as others have told parts of my story. I stayed quiet out of fear of exposing myself publicly, and because I wanted to live a life of my own creation, not one that endlessly orbits this evil man's story. But most of all, I remained quiet out of fear that my perspective would further hurt the others, the victims' loved ones and Ted's family, who, like me, have been repeatedly hurt by the continual reemergence of this story. I have come to realize that I am not protecting anyone by silencing myself. By doing that, I only throw away my ability to live life fully. It is healing to share my perspective. I look forward to hearing the experiences of other people impacted by Ted Bundy when the time feels right to them. The bravery and perspective of those who have told their stories already have been an inspiration. And now I go forward with my new mantra. Life is a gift, and you still have it. Have the courage to be happy. And that is Molly's chapter in the re-release of The Phantom Prince. And good for her for telling her story. I can only imagine what living in the shadow of Ted Bundy must be like, what it must do to you, and unfortunately it does not surprise me that she struggled with substance abuse. I am just happy to hear that she is a recovering addict and feels that her life is on the right path and she finally has a voice. So I don't know if I will be getting a copy of the new book. I'm kind of feeling like I have spent enough time on this book. However, let me know what you think in the comments below. Obviously, I interweave book reviews here on my channel, and I am currently reading a book on Alan Dershowitz, and I think it's along the lines of proving innocence in the Me Too movement, and I am also reading a book about Epstein, and I will be doing reviews on those books eventually. I also have another book on being married to a psychopath. I'm not sure. I will let you know as those get closer to me releasing the reviews. As always, thank you for watching. If you have anything you would like me to review, drop me a comment below. And again, thank you to Stephanie for sending me Molly's chapter. All right, that will be it for this video, and I will see you in the next one.